Alhamdulillah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah wa barakatuh. And welcome to all the non Muslims. But of course, we always open and greet each other with the salutations of Assalamu alaikum, meaning may the peace and blessings of God be upon you all. And I think this is much needed right now, especially in the climate that we're living in currently. Possible World War III, possible more conflicts, possible more poverty. We need to spread peace and build bridges. And as you brothers and sisters know who've been watching my channel, CovFF, this is what I always aim to do with my debates and discussions with people from different faiths, is to build bridges. And we don't need to divide. We need to actually work together to make this a better world. And the only way of doing it is linking together and working together for making it easy for our future. But this is a very interesting, inshallah, this will be a very interesting show today. As you saw earlier, I had a stream this morning. I called it Breakfast with the, I named it Breakfast with the Workers' Party of Britain. And to be honest, I had so many views within a short period of time. It's nearly reached 2K. And people gave me a lot of thumbs up, a lot of praise for that. But no, it's thank to you guys for contributing and writing in the comments and watching the stream. I'm just a tool, a mouthpiece basically, but without the audience, we need to get this message out. And most definitely how the government is failing everybody, and the crush, the Conservative Party and the Labour Party have really destroyed this country. And I really want to move forward and have an alternative voice. And the only way I can do that is by inviting these gentlemen onto my show. And there will be an opportunity, a Q&A towards the end of the show, and I'm looking forward to that. But first of all, enough from me, enough of a monologue from me. I'm going to pass the mic on to Dr. Mohammed. Dr. Mohammed, Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to the show. Briefly, just introduce yourself and who you are and where you currently are.
Wa alaikum assalam, brother. Thank you for inviting me. I'm very pleased to be here. My name is Dr. Muhammad Ali Sayed. I'm not a medical doctor. I'm a PhD doctor. So I did my PhD in economics from the School of Oriental and African Studies. It's development economics, which focuses on how to grow economies whilst doing it in a fair and just manner as much as possible. So I'm the Workers' Party candidate for Coventry South. And, please feel free to ask me any questions as we go along now. Thank you.
Perfect, mashallah. Excellent. Passing the mic on to Brother John Robert Homer. Thank you and welcome to the show. A brief introduction about yourself, please.
Yeah, sure. So I'm the candidate for Nuneaton for the Workers' Party. I haven't been in the Workers' Party for a long time. Mind you, no one has. So we're a new party. My background is I worked in mental health since the 1980s. I have a master's degree in cognitive behavioral therapy. That's what I basically do. I've been doing it today. For me, it sits quite comfortably with my political views. And thank you for your comments at the beginning about the situation in terms of war and the state of the country, because I'm hoping to talk a little bit more about that.
Oh, thank you for that, sharing that with me. And living in Nuneaton, I actually travel to Nuneaton a lot. And Nuneaton town centre itself, you can see the situation of it. A lot of the shops are closing, a lot of antisocial behaviour. And currently next to the town hall, they made like a residential care home or a residential home for young people. And that's caused so many dramas and issues for people who commute into the town centre due to the antisocial behaviour. So I know Nuneaton very well. And finally, Paul, I was in the pleasure with Paul all day today. We met at 10 o'clock in the morning. We had a breakfast. And from there, we went out canvassing. I recorded his interaction with the local community. And I was shocked, to be honest, because how open and friendly he was. Normally, when I have interaction with other party members, as they say, the two chiefs of the same ass, those when it comes to talking to the local community, and that's because the damage that they have caused within the city of Coventry, a lot of people are hurt, a lot of people are frustrated, and of course, rightly so, angry towards the two main parties. But Brother Paul, thank you for joining us. Assalamu alaikum. Nice to see you.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thank you for inviting us. It's a great opportunity to be here again. After our breakfast show, it's now an evening show. And just to speak about me, I'm a local Coventry lad. I was born and brought up my family, my granny and granddad behind me. I went to Coventry before the war. My granny was based down Camley Road, where she lived.
Paul, your mic is very low. I don't know if your Bluetooth is connected to the device that you're speaking on, but it's very low.
I'll try to speak up a bit. Hopefully this will help.
How far are you from your device? It's like you're about half a mile away.
I still have a mic on just below me, but I'm not sure if it's working quite correctly. If it's not, I'll speak a little bit closer to the mic. Is that better?
I'm trying to adjust your... It is better, but it's a shame I can't adjust your volume from...
There's a lot of humming in the background, actually. It's kind of drowning out the sound of the voice. It's interference.
Yeah, I don't think the mic is connected. I think that's what the problem is.
You've got headphones, Paul, with a mic.
No, I've just got a mic on. Oh, actually, I could go and get some headphones with a mic on. That's the point. I'll go and do that one.
Yeah, that'd be fantastic. So while Paul disappears for a short while, I really want to... If people want to add some questions regarding the elections that are taking place, the general elections, feel free to put some comments in the chat. Really appreciate that. And hopefully we can put it forward to the panel. So, Dr. Mohammed, first of all, I'm going to come to you. Why did you choose this particular party? What were your reasons behind choosing this party, I should say?
Yeah, I mean, what happened was, I mean, look, I work at a university, and I've got a very nice career, actually. So I'm a research development manager, focusing on international research at Brunel University, which is based in Uxbridge, London. And in that role, I help researchers, not students, researchers, people who have got a PhD from when they freshly got it and they've just started working, all the way up to professor level. So I help them to, think about their research and design it for proposals which are submitted to get funding to do the research. These are highly competitive schemes we have to apply for. The design of the research has to be really, really good. Top notch, because you're competing sometimes against the whole country, sometimes against everyone in Europe who's in that particular field, and sometimes academics across the world. So a lot of the stuff I actually work with is policy oriented as well. And it's about how do we design research to look at policy and improve policies and so on. So I'm quite familiar, for many years now, I've been in a way working in the background with researchers to help them with their research, design it and get the funding to do the research, to then feed into policy in the hope that it improves things generally for the UK, but also internationally. The thing is, though, Mohammed, seriously, things have just got too bad. And, one thing led to another where I increasingly over the last few months, I'm thinking I can't just work in the background anymore. I have to, try and use whatever benefits I've gained over, over my journey, over my career journey, my engagement with universities and research and policy to actually now step forward and make a contribution. So what happened was, when I wasn't even aware actually that George had a party. Now, I was familiar with George from years ago when, you know, when the Iraq War was on and the way he had to leave Labour and so on. I wasn't aware that he had a party. So what happened was I saw him win Rochdale, and that's, you know, I saw it on TV, and his speech, you know, Keir Starmer, this is for Gaza, right? And then the interview with Sky afterwards. And I was looking at it, I go, look, this is an opportunity now for me to step up. And I thought, well, how can I do that? Because, you know, we tend to have this, we have a tendency, I think a lot of people, I definitely have in the past had this tendency where I have to think things through. If I do A, how will it lead to B, and you kind of like think well into the future. And I think my mindset changed, and I said, don't think about the future, just think about what you can do right now immediately, and just do it, and don't worry about the future. Let's just see where it leads, right? But it leads faction as you know, as a person who cares about humanity and people, and as a Muslim, as my duty as a Muslim, to try and do whatever I can in order to promote good and prevent bad, essentially. So I thought, you know what, I'm going to join this party as a member initially. And so I joined it immediately. Let's not hesitate. Let's not overthink it. Just join and see what happens. And then I joined, and then a couple of days later, I noticed on their website they had, you know, an invitation for people to apply to become a candidate in the upcoming general election. This was quite a few months ago, mind you, so I didn't know when it was going to be. And I thought, again, you're overthinking. I was sort of like, no, I really don't, you know. There's a hesitancy. There was definitely a lot of hesitancy. It's not the pathway I would choose if I had, you know, if I had to pick between different pathways. This is, I think, definitely the least attractive to me personally. As it is with a lot of people, a lot of my colleagues, when you speak, I think, to John and Paul, you find, you know, there's similar sentiment. You speak to anyone in the party, it's almost as though we found ourselves in a situation where we just got to step up now, despite the fact that it's on this pathway. So I applied in the hope, in a way, that I wouldn't be selected because I haven't got any political experience. But one thing led to another, and they said, yeah, we want you for Coventry South. But I live in Coventry South. It's kind of natural to do that. And here I am today.
Well done to you too.
Paul,
you can hear me better now.
A lot better. Alhamdulillah.
Wonderful.
A lot better. I was just going to say to Dr. Mohammed regarding he didn't know when the elections were going to take place. So a lot of people already knew prior to when it was announced, and I'm sure he never ran to the betting shops to put your bet on. So that was very, very interesting. John, I'm going to ask you a question regarding the 10-point program, which was adopted in 2019.
Mm-hmm.
If you want to briefly talk about that, that'd be fantastic.
Oh, blimey, I could have done with some prep for that question, but no problem. Well, I guess a good place to start is number one on the 10-point program, which is that we're an anti-war party. We want an end to imperial wars, but also financial domination. And I guess what that means to me, financial domination, is trade blocs that pretty much control in the same way that so you've got an equivalent. So you have NATO and you have the EU. Now, for me, we were in the EU and NATO. Now we're only in NATO. But basically, an end to those wars is I think, a starting point for the whole thing. The rest of it really kind of comes on the back of that. So I guess that's why it's number one, which is that we think that the reason why our public services are in such a state, why there's a cost of living crisis, why we have an underfunded police force, education system. I'm going to mention mental health services as well, and the general mental health of the nation. All of those things have been neglected, particularly over the last 14 years, but before that as well. And we're linking that to the policy of warmongering and expenditure on weapons going abroad. I mean, coming back to your question, the 10-point program, I think a key point for me is renationalisation of the NHS. I don't think that, I think a lot of people would agree by now the privatization of the health service has really resulted in an inferior health service for everyone. It's for me, it was already privatized quite a while ago. I'm not sure how many more bits there are to sell off, but we've seen this, of course, in other areas. So we could echo similar things in terms of public expenditure on education. Rather than go through all the details of that, I would say that it's basically about a program to cause leveling up, to increase social justice, a sense of fairness. No one gets left behind in a society where you're looking after everyone, and that includes, disabled people, people with mental health problems, autism, so many other different things. We're leaving people behind, and I think that we're linking it to the expenditure on arms, and also as well, while everyone else has suffered, we've seen an increase in the number of billionaires in this country. So clearly, not everyone is doing so badly at the moment. So we think that it's time to address these problems and basically make people as aware of it as we can, and do what we can. And personally speaking, I'm in this for the long haul.
Yeah, I have put the 10-point program on the screen so everybody can
great, thank you.
Just to help you out also. Some of the points are very powerful and they are direct. And to be honest, in one way, they are quite simple. And I don't mean that in a bad way, that we need to deal with the simple issues before we go around causing chaos or saying that the other country or the other democracy in another part of the world needs to be fixed. I think we should fix our own house before we go around, fixing other people's houses. So that is very, very important and is really interesting. But thanks for sharing that. I'm going to put the mic on or ask Brother Paul a question. Paul, we spoke this morning regarding, giving NATO, like I said 60 million this morning, and that was taken from the website about how much the UK government has given so far to NATO is 60 million pounds. That 60 million pounds, I'm sure, Paul, we can use that to fix this country and the state that the old pensioners are living in now. Some of them in the winter seasons were too scared to even put the gas on, put the heating on, because the prices of utility bills were going through the roof. Wouldn't you think that this 60 million could be used for the people who are living in poverty right now in the UK?
Of course. First of all, though, it's not 60 million. It's, I believe this year it's 57 billion that we spent on military defense spending overall, which is the 2.5% of our G point. Yes, a bit more than the 57. But that's a lot of money, and that's our 2.5% of GDP that we're committed to as part of NATO. 6.5 of that is nuclear spending every year. And that's an enormous amount of money. That's not millions, we're talking billions. I mean, the wealth tax that we discussed this morning, 5% on estates over 10 million, that could raise 17 billion. That's a lot of money. But 57 billion is a lot more money. And if we can, the problem with the criticism of the left is, how are you going to pay the bills? Workers' Party's got an answer for that. And our 10-point program is very solutions-based, with programs for housing, for community laundries, all sorts of things. But that's the sort of thing that we can spend the money on. We don't need to invest in needless nuclear deterrence and overseas wars that are causing immigration problems.
Yeah, I stand corrected. It's 60 billion, not million. So thank you for that correction. We have got a quick question, if you don't mind. It's a good question from Brother Mehdi. I think Brother Mehdi lives in Belgium. I'm not sure, or Holland. But the question is, I don't know if you can see it on the screen here. How many candidates do the Workers' Party of Britain have across the UK? I actually saw a list roughly on the website, and I can't believe how diverse the people are on that list, just by the names. I haven't seen the images of the individuals, but every time I scroll down the list, the names, so much diversity within that. I haven't seen that anywhere else. So brothers, feel free to answer that question?
I believe it's 152, although I may be wrong because we had a Sutton Coldfield candidate pull out in an incident this week. But over 150, let's say. And like you say, they're widely diverse from all sorts of faiths, ethnicities, backgrounds, you name it. Like we had a big meeting in London and scores of us got together, if not 100. And it was just fascinating to see the range of people from Palestinians to Jodie McIntyre in Birmingham Yard, who's disabled, and just various different, sections of the community coming together to present a voice on behalf of workers.
All right, that is interesting, because I want to really move on now regarding some of the plans that the Workers' Party want to deal with. Mental health is a big thing in the UK. I think even prior to the COVID situation, post-COVID, I know a lot of people who've gone through mental health. And if Dr. Mohammed, if you don't mind speaking about the mental health issue here in the UK, and what goals and aims has the Workers' Party of Britain, what kind of situations or what would they implement to deal with mental health?
I think fundamentally, if we look at what the Workers' Party is about and what its policies are focusing on, it's the fundamentals. I think you mentioned that in a slightly different way. And mental health is a really, really big issue. I mean, in Coventry, there just aren't enough services. And this is not atypical. It's not unusual. It's not just applicable to Coventry. It is common across the whole of the country, where we don't have enough personnel, enough facilities, enough appointments. And we've got people, especially younger people now, who are suffering immensely. And with mental health, it's very, very important. I mean, actually, John is the expert because he does CBT. He actually works in this field. So I'll pass over to you in a moment, John, if that's okay.
Yeah, thanks.
I'm talking more sort of like a macro structural type of level in terms of policy design. One of the key issues is, it all fits together. If you think about the Workers' Party, all of these policies, actually, they're not disjointed. They fit together and they integrate and they provide solutions in a very holistic, quite smooth manner. So one of the key things with mental health and the NHS more generally is we're completely against privatization, and we want to renationalize all of it, because at the moment what we're getting is huge amounts of wastage, profiteering. I mean, we've got the agencies. We don't have the people joining the NHS. We've got people joining the agencies who then are charging extortionate amounts from the NHS to supply exactly the same person as if they were employed by the NHS. So we've got to think of this from a sort of like a more strategic level, where, what's the supply pipeline looking for in terms of mental health professionals? What sort of training is available? So that then feeds into our educational policy, which is free education for everyone for life. So you might have somebody who later on in life wants to become a mental health professional, get access to university, get the training, feed into the pipeline. So it's all interconnected. And I mean, the main thing with mental health is it's the supply of it's the provision, service provision, which is a key issue. And that is fundamentally, especially in something like mental health, utterly dependent on the supply of the personnel and the training that these personnel have had. As I'll pass over to John now to go into a bit more detail, because it's his field. Thank you.
It's great, though, what you said, Dr. Muhammad Ali. I think that the presence or the increase in mental health issues themselves are representative of the state of society anyway. I mean, it's not like we wouldn't have any mental health issues, but what we've seen is an increase in mental health issues over the last 15 years. And we kind of could guess why, right? People can't afford to pay for things. People don't have decent jobs. In the jobs that they're in are poor working conditions. Depression obviously is a huge thing at the moment. We talked about disillusionment. This is all linked to the state of things right now. People watch the news, you're depressed by that. But going back to the point about profiteering, I mean, I think I have to mention the pharmaceutical industry, because they play a key role in the provision of mental health. And there's a lot of money to be made in the pharmaceutical industry. So if we're asking people to, provide mental health, you have the big pharmaceutical lobby there, who are rubbing their hands together thinking, well, hang on a minute, we've got something to say about this. Obviously, they're in it for making a lot of money. There's a fundamental flaw with making a huge multi-billion-pound global industry responsible for your mental health problems. There's a conflict of interest in terms of the amount of research that goes, the amount of money and time it takes to research drugs. There's so much pressure to put them out and make the money. The drugs of today are I think the phrase they use is black triangled drugs. In other words, banned drugs of tomorrow. So we've seen lots of drugs in the past in mental health used for years, and then after a while we see that, hang on a minute, the side effects are probably not worth it. On balance, people are addicted, or the terrible side effects, and now we're seeing a new sort of generation of drugs which we're all putting our faith in the pharmaceutical industry as well. And just to echo on the point of training is another key issue as well. So I myself trained as a mental health nurse. I trained as a cognitive behavioral therapist. I was not properly utilized within the NHS, exactly because of what I'm saying about this profiteering. And I think that, and I've been involved in training people in mental health workers as well. And all the research says that psychological therapies are the best thing that we've got. The most effective way of delivering good mental health care is psychological therapies, but that's not where the money goes. So we can see that the whole system is undermined by the profiteering of it.
Paul, do you want to add anything onto that? But thank you, John. That is really interesting, especially when somebody is actually in that field and they experience it hands-on. It's different when you can observe it from the outside, but when you're actually physically involved in it, it's a different story because you can speak from experience. But that's really appreciated. Paul, mental health,
I don't think I can add much to what John just said. He's explained to me the details of the problems he's experienced over, I think it's 30 years in that trade. And well, that's not a trade, but it's the private-public partnerships are a trade that he's talking about. And some of the examples he's discussed with me about that are truly shocking about the amount of money that's being wasted.
Yeah, I think recently there was a story regarding some of the PPE. A lot of it had to be destroyed, and quite a lot of it was destroyed, and millions of pounds worth. If I'm not wrong in that, if anybody knows the figure, feel free to tell the audience, because even that caused a lot of ripples, because that's taxpayers' money, and people made money. Big companies made a lot of money by the taxpayers paying for it. It is disgusting. Paul, John, do you know much about that story?
I wonder if it was the same PPE equipment that Moni was involved in purchasing, and the Tory peer whose family took £12 million for securing that contract. And it was a lot of kind of what I heard, it was a lot of kind of fairly inferior stuff that was made wherever. It doesn't matter where it's made, really. And I heard that none of it was any good anyway. So somebody made a lot of money out of making it, buying it, and it all came out of public money, and it didn't do us any good whatsoever.
Yeah. I really want to focus on something that is actually similar to mental health, and of course, healthcare for people. We know, and we've all experienced it, when you go to A&E here, especially Coventry, the walk-in centre, or even if you've got a young child, you take the child to the A&E in the university hospital. Sometimes you're waiting 5 hours, up to 8 hours. So there's something that has to be done with the healthcare system. And also the situation I really want to touch on is people or individuals coming from a different country to work for the NHS. I don't see a problem with it. I really don't. But at the same time, there are people who live in the UK, who were born in the UK, and it's a double-edged sword, and this can be quite controversial. There are jobs there, and if people are willing to leave their country of origin and come over and work and fill the jobs, I don't see a problem with that. But there's two questions in that, meaning the waiting period. For example, if you need an X-ray, if you need an appointment, you've got to. Sometimes you can pass away by the time your appointment arrives. And I've heard stories of that. And also the waiting time in A&E is mind-boggling, brothers and sisters. If you guys, Dr. Muhammad Ali and John and Paul, want to share some thoughts on that, go ahead.
Yeah, if I may, I'll again, this is going back to fundamental principles and ways of thinking actually about a particular problem, which hasn't been done for a very, very long time by our politicians. So in the 1800s, there was a German economist, Friedrich List, and he very strongly advocated for a move from agriculture towards manufacturing in the German economy. And his key argument was that if we build up our manufacturing base, we're actually going to be increasing or improving and elevating the level of education and skill and human capital of our workforce. It was considered very, very precious and a very important thing amongst nations to elevate your workforce as high as you can get them and provide them all the facilities for that, because it's a competitive world, right? And we find ourselves in a situation in particular now, I mean, this is across the board, right, really, but since you're talking about the NHS, I'll use that example where we are allowing the next generation to wither, right? We're not providing them with the right educational opportunities. We're not providing them with the right environment, right? It's so hard nowadays as a young person, right? Compared to what it probably was way before the Tories, right? Where, things, to me at least, they seem to be, as long as you kept out of trouble, you didn't get into too much trouble, you'd find your way eventually and you'd be all right. But now, our kids are struggling up against a torrent, not a stream, a torrent, right? Just to try and stay on the straight and narrow and achieve something with their life, because the cards have been severely stacked against them. One of the key issues here, not only for the NHS, but across the board, is the mindset which says, these are our people in the UK, they're our next generation, they're our children, we need to invest in them, not only for altruistic reasons or, it's nice to do, but in terms of competitiveness, because I tell you, you look at the way what China does and the way they invest in their next generation. If you look at a lot of other countries, they take it very seriously, and we completely have neglected it. And one of the implications then is that we don't have enough doctors, we don't have enough nurses. If we do get them, they're treated like crap. Come on, let's be frank about it. Look at the pay of our teachers, right? Let's move to education now. Let's just flip there a bit, right? These are the people who we are entrusting our next generation to, teachers, right? And look at the burdens we're placing upon them. Look at the facilities we're giving to them. Look at the disrepair of the schools, right? Look at the hours. Look at the pay. Those guys, I mean, seriously, those guys should be earning, six figures, because what they're doing is determining the quality and the ability of the next generation. That's an extremely important role, right? but they're struggling to pay their bills as well. So it just needs a complete rethink, actually, a complete restructure, right? A complete renationalization, a completely different approach. So, I mean, we all know what George Galloway says in relation to the Conservatives and Labour. They're two cheeks of the same backside and so on. In reality, both of those parties will say what they think you want to hear, right? To get them in, right? And what will actually, and now remember, I work with researchers who work on policy, right? So there's a bit of a background there in terms of my understanding. They'll promise whatever they need to promise. It's so difficult to get policy right because you need to, first of all, have the evidence in order to be able to formulate the hypothetical, theoretical policy correctly in the first place. And then you need implementation properly. It needs to be context specific, right? Sector specific. It needs to be adjusted so in order to render it and allow it to be effective. And then you need continuous monitoring and evaluation in order to make sure that what you thought of, what you designed in terms of policy, and what you're implementing in terms of policy is actually resulting in the right kind of outputs and the development of what you're looking for, and you're trying to avoid as much as possible unintended consequences. We're very short term. We've been very short term. We're not thinking strategically. China's thinking 50 years ahead, right? Absolutely. We're not even thinking 5 years ahead. These guys are just thinking, let me get in, right? Let me just get through this election and let me get elected, and then let's take it easy and we'll just handle it as it happens, and then after another 5 years you'll get all the promises again, and on and on and on it goes. Now I could go on and on about this, but I'll hand over.
You actually spoke some facts, because
let's through the potential of the country, right? We've got so much that we could do if we just had people who actually cared about the country.
You're right. And to echo your point, I mean, we could talk about the NHS, but we the same theme is there with education and transport and utilities, and we could go on the same themes. But on the NHS, to your point around, because you were saying about basically, if you like, foreign staff or immigrant staff, you want to say. I mean, I just looked actually, and 32% of the doctors in the NHS are Asian. Now, people might say, oh, why can't we use our own doctors? Well, because some people would say that, because most of them train here and then they want to go abroad. So why do they want to go abroad? Well, because the conditions are better for them abroad. If they go to other European countries, the health services are now better. So it becomes hard for us to be proud of our NHS. We're literally running it down. But of course, we can't cope without immigrant staff coming into the NHS. I mean, it's just completely short-sighted. And when you've worked in the NHS for 30 odd years, like I did, you work alongside people of different genders, races, religions, and all the rest of it, and that just feels normal to you. Which is nice, because it means that within the NHS people are more integrated. But of course, you've got people, I won't mention them by name, who suggest that the reason why the NHS is in such a state is because of immigrants. It's the immigrants that run the NHS and have kept the NHS going. And I agree with the point about not thinking forward, because we've got to think about retaining staff and looking after staff and having the right training for staff, and none of that has been happening for years now. So this really has to be part of what we have to do, is rethink the whole strategy.
Yeah, it's very shocking. Just before, sorry, Paul, I'm going to let you speak. I just want to mention that here in the UK, there's been so many occasions where doctors and nurses have to go on strike because of the conditions that they have to work under. It is, for me, it just baffles me that we can spend billions of pounds arming another country to kill other people, but we can't give that money to our own people who are looking after us. and they do a fantastic job. Like you said, John, I totally 100% agree with you. They do a fantastic job, but due to the resources, they are restricted. And like I said, every time the professional people, even though they are under pressure and have to work under tight conditions, they are still professional and courteous. So big shout out to the staff who work in the NHS. Paul, anything that you want to share, feel free.
I was just going to say that I fear we're going to face another 5 years of chaos under Keir Starmer's Labour Party. He has no plans, really anything different from the Tories, to sort out the NHS and the crisis that it's in. And I just think the Workers' Party is much more of a party of action. Keir Starmer, as Dr. Muhammad Ali was saying, Labour politicians are just going to get into power and put their feet up, divest all the power to the EU, to the national devolved governments, to Israel, to America, and really, not really work hard for this country. That's what I'm feeling, and we'll see over the next 5 years if they get into power.
If I can just say, I'm glad you said that, Paul, because I mean, when they were asking him about what is he going to do first, as far as the NHS is concerned, he wants to cut the waiting lists, and he'll do that by offering staff to work overtime so that they can be even more driven into the ground to earn the same money that they were earning a little while ago, maybe a few years back, and that's how we'll do it. So there is no plan for the NHS from the Labour Party whatsoever.
It's the same with energy and.
Come on, Paul, carry on.
I was going to say that their Great British Energy Scheme, it's just another public-private initiative that's a quango and will probably end up costing us a lot of money. So again, at the Workers' Party, we've got a plan for a net zero referendum, so we get a real voice on this and see who actually benefits.
Okay, I've got some questions which I actually already pre-wrote here on the piece of paper. The issue of supporting the family. I think this is a big issue right now within the Workers' Party of Britain. How would you support the family? And what actions or procedures would you put into place for supporting the family? I know it's a general question. Feel free to answer it the way you feel best. But Dr. Mohammed, I'd love to have your thoughts about supporting the family.
Okay, so first of all, I think there's a need to recognize that there are different setups in terms of family, right? And you can have a situation where some people simply prefer to have, where the male partner will work, and the woman will stay home and invest her time and her effort in trying to bring up the children to the best ability possible to make them the best possible human beings, right? There is value in that. There is enormous value in that particular lifestyle choice or family model choice and so on. At the same time, if both parents want to work, there's value in that as well, right? So I think things need to be structured in a way to allow for different lifestyle choices in terms of a division of labor or a partnership in terms of earning or looking after the children and whatever it is. And there needs to be a bit of flexibility in terms, generally I'm speaking, there needs to be a bit of flexibility. There needs to be a lot of support though. There does need to be a lot of support, because one of the key problems, which I would suggest it contributes to other sorts of issues of concern in society, is where you've got children who are growing up who haven't got the right level of attention and parental care, essentially. I'll put it that way. And what do then? They turn to their friends, and they can fall into the wrong company. And especially in some areas of the country, they can get involved in gangs, because in a way, a lot of these criminal gangs then become a substitute sort of family. They fill the gap, which is left because, you know, of inadequate support to the family, essentially, which the government has to, you know, ultimately take responsibility for. There's only so much that parents can take responsibility for in themselves. You know, everybody faces different circumstances. Some of these circumstances for some families and for some parents are extremely challenging, and we need someone to be able to step in at the very least for the sake of the children, to be able to at least somewhat cushion the children from adverse consequences, sometimes even in relation to, you know, mistakes, bad decisions that parents make as well. So I think there's a huge role generally, and a lot of this is about childcare support. Yes, if both parents want to work, that's a major part of our policy, by the way. A lot of it is about providing, you know, nutrition and access to free school meals. Absolutely essential. I mean, this was brought in decades ago. This was actually brought in the UK, where first they provided education, and then, so hold on a minute, you know, the poorer ones are at a bit of a disadvantage, because then we're expecting them to be educated on an empty stomach. So we need to level out. Right? And therefore, you got the provision of, you know, school meals subsidized and free and so on. So, you know, ultimately, any society should really, in its right mind, if we've got a society that's right-minded, being led by right-minded people, and politicians in particular, should be aiming to level the playing field for the next generation. So in an ideal world, it shouldn't matter really where you're born, right? And it shouldn't even matter what your personal family circumstances are, you know, to such a great extent as it does today. We need to try and give the next generation as best an opportunity to achieve their full potential, not only for themselves. Again, I'm not talking, remember, I've got this development economist kind of training and background. So I don't only think of things in terms of altruism, right? Although that's really good to be able to do that. But I think of it in terms of the national interest as well. What do we want our next generation to look like? Do we want them to be struggling, or do we want to provide families with the right amount and the right quality of support in order to be able to produce, you know, a fine, really strong, competitive next generation? So I'll hand over to my colleague.
No, that is very profound what you said, Dr. Mohammed. I echo what you mentioned there, 100%. You know, there've been occasions where there's been reports of kids going to school hungry, and the teacher noticed it. There's a famous football player, I think it's Rashford from Manchester United, who started a charity and a program to help with this situation. And in reality, it's the role of the government to provide that. Without any doubt, you know, they should be providing free meals, food for the children, and support for the family. There's so many issues of neglect now, where they're both family members. The family is working and the child's being neglected. And like you mentioned, a lot of the time the child then resorts to joining gangs and other type of criminal activities. And that's a big thing. And we need to nip that in the bud big time. John, I'd love to get.
Could I just add to that, Mohammed? Because you've got my, you know, I'm sparking now a bit. So sorry to cut in, but just a quick thing. I mean, we really have to think. Look, Britain has got a very big economy, right? It's in the top 8, I would say, realistically, of the world, right? In terms of GDP, they say 6. They say 6, right? But you know. Let's have a look at the figures properly, right? But it is. I'd say it's in the top 8, right? Safely in the top 8, right? And the thing is, we've got the wealth, right? So why are we even talking about this? Why the hell are we expecting a footballer to stand up and lobby and try and pressurize the government to make available enough food for these kids to go to school on a reasonably full stomach? I mean, is this some sort of a sick joke, or what is it? You know, what's going on here? So the fundamental problem is, again, I'm going back to fundamentals, because if you read the 10 points, right, you read the 10 points, they're fundamental. It's a restructure which needs to be undertaken, actually, right? Are we here to work for the economy, or is the economy here to work for us? You know, which way round is it? Are we here just to get born, go through school, right, be socialized, good obedient little workers and employees, do as you're told, right, earn your thing, pay your bills, and struggle, right, and taxed the hell out of us, right? And by the way, the Workers' Party wants to change that, because we want to raise it, you know, the basic threshold from 12.5 up to 21,200.
That's right.
Which will be of enormous benefit. That's very, you sort of like, you can see where that's targeting now, right? That's not talking about, you know, oh, we're going to reduce it from 45 to 40. You can see where we're going with just that on its own, really, right? And who we're trying to benefit. And the fundamental problem is, are we here to work for the economy? Are we here to serve the economy? Or do we want an economy which serves the people? Which one do you want? Because we've got the money, but at the same time, we've got children going to school on hungry stomachs, and our politicians haven't got the bottle to stand up and do it. We need a footballer, you know, God bless him, you know, respect to him, right? Everybody needs to do whatever they can do, and he did a marvelous job. But why did he have to do that? Why did he even have to step up and do that?
I can feel your frustration and anger, Dr. Mohammed. I really can. And I don't want you to, get your blood pressure too high. But I definitely, because I've got young children, and I see, you sometimes physically see other children when they're going to school, with shoes, with holes in the shoes, and you can tell, they are, it is heartbreaking. And at the end of school, you see the young children going to the local fish and chip shop to get something to eat, because at home the parents are working, and for them to go home to an empty house, or possibly meeting up with their friends and being mischievous, you see that, and it is breaking the community. It really is. And I appreciate the strong words, Dr. Mohammed. I'd let Brother Paul, if you don't mind, John. Paul's been silent, and Paul, what's your take on
silent?
Yes, I just wanted to wholeheartedly agree with Dr. Muhammad Ali on what he just said, particularly in relation to his experience with policy. I think we need a fertility-based policy instead of a financial-based policy, and I think that's what the restructuring that Workers' Party 10-point plan presents. We've not only got the school meal provisions, but there's provision for community youth clubs, provision for the community laundries, creches, things like this that the families need. Along with the cost of living crisis that they're going through, and the measures we can take to help with that.
You guys make some very, very profound points, and these are grassroots, which Dr. Mohammed Ali mentioned that, why do football players or other personalities have to pay the bill, or has to play the role of what our politicians should be doing naturally, without even questioning it? They should be there doing it. But it is shocking that we live here in the UK, and young children, toddlers, are going to school on an empty stomach. It really does break your heart. John, I'd love to have your thoughts on that also.
I mean, we started off by talking about the family, right? And I don't know why I'm thinking of maybe teenagers, maybe 16 to 18-year-olds, at a sort of the crossroads of life, if you like, in terms of, the opportunities should be there for them, right? But a lot of kids of that age, their parents are not going to be able to afford tuition fees at university, right? So there's not much point in them doing their A-levels, is there really? So that's just, they went to a state school anyway, so they maybe didn't get as good a grades as some others, right? So that's shut off from them, isn't it? I'm talking about a large percentage of the population are not going to go to university not because they're not capable of that, but because their parents can't afford that, right? Now, that same kid, let's think about their options, right? It might be male, might be female. Well, what are their options? They can't go to university. So what jobs are available? Well, there's no obvious industry for them to go into, is there? The apprenticeships that are available are extremely poor. They're looking at maybe a 0 hours contract in, I don't know, Aldi or something like that. Maybe I'm not supposed to mention the names of supermarkets. You can bleep that out if you want. That's not my favorite one anyway. So the parents maybe are not working. The parents don't have much money. Maybe their parents have got alcohol and drug problems, mental health problems. So you can't really rely on your parents, right? So what do? You maybe join a gang, go shoplifting, something like that. You know, at least it's so tempting for them to get drawn into something like that, something like crime. I think that we've created a situation where we're going to have a whole generation of disillusioned youth. Maybe the reason why this matters to me and matters to all of us, but it matters to me because my two sons are kind of just past that crossroad. And, you know, I would help them as much as I can, but it's not enough because the opportunities are just not there for them.
Yeah, 100%. If anybody else wants to add anything on before I pose the next question, and this will really affect a lot of people, especially my international audience, and majority of them are Muslims. Anything else you guys want to add before we move on?
No.
Okay. I'm just going through some of Keir Starmer's his statement. My first steps for change. He's got 6 steps that he wants to deliver, and it's quite comical. It really is. This guy should be put in a museum. 100%. This guy should be put in a museum to show the future generation of how not to become or try to become a prime minister of the UK. It's really baffling. Swiftly moving on, I really want to talk on the situation on Palestine, and it is what the figures are now. Approximately over 40,000, if I'm confirmed, fatalities in Palestine and in Gaza.
Well, those are Hamas figures. Those are Hamas figures. Sorry,
I shouldn't laugh, but it's horrible when you hear people say, "But this is not like, you know, Hamas figures or the hospital figures from Gaza, you know, they can't confirm, or they just kind of like, you know, add on numbers willy-nilly. But we love to talk about that. You know, George Galloway has been outspoken from the start, you know, and this is why a lot of the truth seekers have kind of like been drawn to him, because he does speak the truth. And I would love to get your thoughts. I'll start with Paul, because he has been patiently waiting. You know, why is Palestine so important?
Well, it's a genocide. We're not afraid to use that word about it. And the figures, the Israelis say that it's Hamas figures, but no one actually knows the figures. I believe it's 39 something thousand it's up to, but Khan Yunis is being ethnically cleansed, and it's 10 scores more today. You can't keep count. And we're talking about not just the killed women and children. We're talking about the maimed and injured, and the numbers of that Hamas figures are 80,000 or 90,000 now, and that's not even counting those buried under the rubble that Hamas couldn't find, which could be another 50, 60,000. Who knows? So we don't even know what the figures are. But the main figures are bodies, you know, blown apart, as George Galloway describes them. You know, fathers searching, scrabbling in the rubble. This sort of language is what's happening over there. People are watching it on live stream. You can just tune in and you see the horror of what's happened to that strip. It's been blown apart. So who knows what the figures are? But it's just an international outrage that everyone needs to be talking about to stand in solidarity with the Palestinian people for what they're going through.
Yeah, just today, I think a marketplace in a place called Zaytun was shelled by Israeli tanks, killing people in the marketplace. and there's images of bread which people were selling, soaked with the blood. It comes to a stage, and we've been talking about this for months on this channel. It's come to a stage where me personally, I can't watch the images anymore. My heart is, as a man, and I mentioned to Paul previously, I've I served in the British Army for 10 years and 5 years in the United Nations, and I seen conflict. But the images that you see right now and the weaponry that Israel is using right now on innocent women and children and men, I can't bear it anymore. I get emotional, and before I do get emotional, I really want to put the same question to John. John, why is Palestine so important?
Well, I just want to start off by saying that there's a reason why the IDF are not on people killed or injured or whatever, and that's because they're so busy killing them. And I mean, this isn't meant to be, maybe this isn't true, but I just feel like because their aim is to clear it, they're counting how many are left. And that isn't really going too far. It might be going too far for some people, but it's not going too far if you believe that this is a genocide in progress. And I do. And I think the reason why it's so important is not just because of the scale of what's happening, but also because these are people who were refugees in the first place, who were literally put there and penned in by Israel in the first place. And there may have been other situations that have happened before, which you could describe as a genocide, but it has never been so much in plain view. So everyone sees it now, and then everyone sees the response of our leaders in excusing it, and then it puts you, well, it doesn't put me in a quandary, but it clearly puts some people in a quandary, because a lot of them are going to go out and vote for Labour despite that. So I ask myself, is this because they're not aware of this, or is it because they're, kind of just ignoring it? Oh, I can't understand it. Maybe they're so sick of, they've blocked it out of their mind entirely. But for me, the significance of Gaza is that it's probably the factor that caused me to come into this situation and to want to resist this, because it's, frankly speaking, the most horrific thing I've ever seen in my life. And the worst thing of all about it is it's still carrying on now, and we can still do nothing about it. The guys here are probably doing as much as anyone, because we're speaking up about it. We're going and speaking on the streets to everyone about it. And frankly, people are either deeply affected by it, or they just can't. I think there are some people who are still making excuses in their head, and they still believe maybe the lies that they're told. But the lies are unbelievable. I'm sorry, I'm getting a bit worked up now, and I'm glad you didn't do this question at the beginning. I'm sure Dr. Mohammed's got a lot of things to say as well.
Yeah, I've been doing shows over a couple of months now with a brother called, like I said, with Yusuf Ismail, and I've had individuals in the chat, like ostriches. Their heads are in the sand. They are in the thought process that it's the land of the Israelis or the Zionists, and they've got the right to take it back because they use biblical verses. And I get I get frustrated. Sometimes I'm lost for words that we have people especially from my American audience. Unfortunately, I don't want to name. Well, I am going to name the faith, the Christian evangelists who want this to quickly take part, and to happen, because they're waiting for the second coming of Jesus, peace be upon him. As Muslims, we believe that Jesus, peace be upon him. So they want the temple to be rebuilt, and they want this to hurry up quickly because this is what the biblical scripture says. And my blood boils. It really does. But before I get, like I said, emotional, and I thank you, John. I really appreciate your thoughts on that. If there's anything else you want to add, feel free. Before we ask Dr. Muhammad Ali, why is Gaza so important? John, do you want to add anything? I know I cut you off.
No, I'm just letting my blood pressure go down. To go with Dr. Mohammed for now. I'll come back in minutes.
All right. So I'm gonna talk about something which may surprise everyone. Actually, it's probably something that you're not expecting. That's why it's going to be surprising rather than outrageous. Last week, I gave a conference presentation, and is an academic presentation, and the title was, "Is the inverted commas war on Gaza actually a war, or also a war on moral courage?" So is a war on Gaza also a war on moral courage? And what I've done is I've looked at the literature on moral courage, and I've looked at examples in terms of what's been unfolding, in terms of media coverage and responses and the way people are reacting, celebrities as well, and so on. And essentially, what I'd say is Gaza is important not only for the reasons already mentioned, although that in of itself is more than enough, right? We all know that, right? But the thing is, actually, the way we're going to react, the way the West, right, the way the UK, because this is our country, right? We care about this country, but the West generally as well, the way it's going to handle this is actually going to determine and define its trajectory in the long term forever, essentially, right? So the thing is, you have a situation where moral courage, I'll just spend a couple of minutes to give you a little background so that we understand what am I, so that it's clear to everyone who's not familiar with this, where I'm going with this. Moral courage is essentially when you stand up against a more powerful actor on a point of principle, and it's very different from helping behavior. So there are two types of pro-social helping other people. You can categorize crudely pro-social behavior into helping behavior and morally courageous behavior. Now, helping behavior is when you give charity, or you give a helping hand, or you spend some time, and that's really good, right? Don't get me wrong, it's absolutely a wonderful thing to do. One of the aspects that you can consider when we're talking about helping behavior is that usually there is some sort of social benefit to doing that, especially if you promote what you're doing in public, right? So if I go to the mosque and I get out a wad of, sort of like notes, and I was like, oh, where's my money? Oh, I dropped it. Oh, I'm putting it in the charity box, and everyone's looking, right? If I do something like that, it's still helpful, right? In terms of the money's being given, right? But, if people are watching me doing that, they'll think, oh, Dr. Mohammed Ali, he's a really kind guy. He's a nice guy. Somebody might come and, pat me on the back or whatever. And that kind of applies. It's just a sort of like an outrageous example. It wouldn't normally happen in any mosque, of course. But what I'm saying is essentially to illustrate the point that helping behavior can be rewardful, socially. Morally courageous behavior is very distinctive in the categorization of pro-social behavior because it's usually punished. So you've got you're morally courageous. You've got the morality aspect. So you just as an individual say, what's happening to a particular set of people or a person is just morally repugnant. It's wrong, right? And a lot of us have that natural instinct, right? We know right from wrong instinctively. But then the courage comes in because to stand up and actually say that it's wrong and speak out against it and struggle against it and try and stop it from happening and preventing it in the first place, or stopping it like needs to be done right now in Gaza, right? it needs courage. And the reason it needs courage is usually because the oppression occurs from a much more powerful actor, and it's executed and implemented on a much weaker one. And that's why there's a morality issue. You're like, the weak are being oppressed, they're being taken advantage of. This is wrong morally. I need to stand up. I need to stop this. But the ones who are doing it are going to be more powerful, so I need courage. And there's usually negative consequences for the person who's morally courageous. Now, we've seen the students are doing this everywhere, right? In the US, in the UK, but you'll notice that employees are not doing that, right? Generally speaking, academics, researchers in universities are not all marching, they're not striking, they'll go on strike for pay, right? They'll go on strike for their pensions. Now, remember, I work with these, I work in a university, so maybe I'm exhibiting a bit of moral courage in talking like this as well. But practice makes perfect, right? But the thing is, they're silent, but it's the students who are actually doing this. So, you know, either we can watch this. That again, whether it's a genocide, technically, you know, we know that these guys are being massacred, right? You know, if someone can get away with murdering someone and get off technically, it doesn't mean that it's okay, right? For some technical legal manipulation or whatever. So whether it's a genocide technically, legally, or whether it's not, it's a massacre, it's a slaughter. We see it, right? And the problem really is, apart from what it is in of itself, which is a helpless population being bombed, right, to oblivion with 2,000-pound bombs, right? I think, correct me guys if I'm wrong, but 3 times the amount of, explosives has already been thrown as compared to Hiroshima and Nagasaki combined, right? Already on Gaza. I heard that figure. I haven't verified it, but it could very well be correct. And these people can't escape. So normally you have a situation where there's a conflict, people exit, they become refugees, they escape. These people are trapped and they're being bombed and they're being slaughtered. It's as simple as that. No one can deny that, right? Whatever
also,
it is.
Also the fact that they're being starved, of course.
And starved and the medical and
exactly.
It's just it is the worst imaginable situation that a human being can. If you thought, what's the worst possible situation a human being can find themselves in? I can't think of anything worse than this. And if before this had happened, you'd ask me, I wouldn't have been able to imagine it.
Absolutely.
Because it's that bad, right? You can't imagine something like this happening anywhere in the world to anyone by anyone. Okay?
Absolutely.
But the thing is, we find that our politicians haven't got the bottle to even speak out. They can't even vote for, a ceasefire. I mean, this is the quality.
I was just going to move on to that. Because I wanted to ask everybody's opinion. When it first happened,
this is the moral courage that they've got. And these are going to be the leaders of our country. What the hell are they going to do for our kids if they can't even raise a voice for those kids?
Absolutely.
I mean, this is the quality of leadership this country has got.
Yeah, absolutely.
They've used our money to destroy a health service in another country when they should have been spending it on ours, and they think it's okay. I mean, the point, I like the idea of the difference between helping and moral courage, because to be the first to come forward, to be the first to speak up and say these things, that's where the real courage is. Because the first people spoke up in Parliament to say there ought to be a ceasefire, not this is a genocide, not the people are starving, not we've got to stop this, we've got to help them, but just to say there needs to be a ceasefire. First people who said that were shot down. People have been kicked out of the Labour Party for this. That's the kind of party that the Labour Party is. You're not allowed to speak out over it. We know they've taken money for it. We know they've been paid off. As Dr. Mohammed says, that's the moral courage that we've been being led by. I mean, I think that, if you're the first to speak up against that, then you're the bravest person. But none of us are as brave as the people in Gaza, and they have no choice. So now I'm getting worked up again. But it's
you're getting me worked up too. The courage that they have shown, the Palestinians, I don't think we, as people living here in the West, could deal with the situation that they are in right now, I think we'll break straight away. We would just roll up and just claim that we got. And I'm not making fun of mental health. Kids these days, my own kids, if the internet doesn't work, if the Wi-Fi goes off for about 10 seconds or 10 minutes, it's the end of the world for them, and they're stressed out. They can't deal with it. But the people in Palestine right now, and I'll let Brother Paul deal with the situation that the people of Palestine are dealing with right now. No water, no electricity, no medical care, no food, and etc. etc. Brother Paul, I would love to talk and hear your views regarding the situation in Gaza right now. If you want to talk about it, feel free without getting worked up. And we are getting worked up, and I just want to bring the temperature down, if that's okay. Paul, go ahead.
Sure. Well, I guess it's quite the situation is. It was very well described by Chris Williamson in one of his videos before the election yesterday. I think it went out. It had an animation of him with a background behind him showing the strip actually being turned into rubble by Israeli jets in animation, and that really captured it for me in a video. So I suggest everyone has a look at that. And I just to add to Dr. Mohammed Ali's point about moral courage and the feedback we've had in our campaign, maybe just change the tone a little bit. But the number of people that have when they see by flyer saying no to genocide, vote no to war, and they know we're standing for Palestine because it's got a flag on, they realise. Some of them clock it and they fist bump me. Some of them have wanted to stop me in the street, shake my hands. I got free chocolate barfi in one of the Indian shops we visited today after you left me, with people just overwhelmed with gratitude that we are the ones standing against the Labour Party, and people are just so disgusted by them, I think, in certain areas of town, that they just will not vote, and they're just looking, what can we do with our voices? How can we act? And at least we're trying to give them that.
Yeah, so the initial question was why Gaza is important, and we touched on so many different aspects of it. And you've got to be a heartless person to kind of not understand what these gentlemen just mentioned right now. You've got to be totally heartless. And I do feel that some of the people in power, as Muslims, we believe that we have to stand in front of God and be questioned upon what we did in this life. And I do feel that some of the people in power and authority right now don't have that same mindset where they have to stand in front of God and be judged for what they have done. And this is why leadership in Islam is such a heavy burden to become a leader of a nation, because you'll be questioned on the day of judgment how you dealt with your subjects and the people that you had to control. So it's a very difficult situation to be in. But I know time is at a premium. We've overhit nearly an hour and 15 minutes. We have got another question, and it's a very good question, to be honest. Let me just quickly scroll up and watch it. I don't know if you guys can see the question regarding the stance regarding higher education and university fees. If you want to deal with that question, anybody, go ahead.
I can kind of. We're looking to slash the education and tuition fees. That's first on our agenda to use with the money we're hoping to spend to save rather on defence and the windfall tax. So our position is get rid of them entirely, I believe.
Yeah, again, living here in Coventry, we've got a massive university city here. Of course, we have students from all over the world come and attend the university. Majority of I think are from China. There's a huge financial gain for the local authority here in Coventry. I'm sure Dr. Mohammed can share his thoughts on that, working in a university. But here in the university, here in the town centre, there's apartments being made for more students to come and attend the university. So I don't know how the government, foreign governments pay for the students to come here and learn and live and much more. But as for somebody who's living in Coventry, for me to get a student loan, or anybody to get a student loan and then pay it back over a number of years, the debt that they have to go into, students, and the rent, the rent itself these days is nearly about £1,000 or close to £1,000 a month for rent, and plus then you got your expenses for utility bills and food and upkeeping. I'd love to get your thoughts on that. You know, the aspects of student fees. How will your party deal with that situation? And Brother Paul did touch on that. Dr. Mohammed, I know you're in that field. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Okay, so the university sector is in a big mess, and it's difficult to know where to start, actually, because there's so much that needs to be changed. I'll just put in 2 or 3 different sort of points here, but the whole thing, again, we need to go back to fundamentals, and there needs to be a restructure. There's no point, if your arm's hanging off and you've got a cut on your finger as well, the tweak by putting a plaster on your finger is not going to solve the problem that your arm's hanging off, right? And this is what both the Conservatives and Labour always seem to do in terms of the way they even think about policy. It's just put a plaster on it, put a plaster on it. No, you need major surgery, right? So what it is that there are 2 or 3 things. First of all, what's happened is since fees came in, UK students actually find themselves at a disadvantage, right, in relation to foreign students, because foreign students pay more fees. And I have heard, I haven't verified it, I haven't looked into it, because I tend to deal with researchers rather than students. But I have heard that in some places, if you're a foreign student and your grades are slightly lower even than a home student, you will get admission because you're going to pay higher fees. And I think that's manifestly unfair under any circumstances, so your A-level grades, I'm talking about, the entry grades are slightly lower than a home student, so they'll give preference to the foreign student rather than the home student. They'll give the foreign student a place because they're going to pay higher fees. So these are supposed to be public sector universities, and what happened to equality of opportunity and a level playing field and merit? Does anybody know what that word means anymore? Right? So anyway, one of the key issues, now this is very relevant to Coventry South, which is my constituency, and it's happening right now, so I'll talk about. So that's one thing, right? First of all, the Workers' Party wants no fees. I think, in a way, education has got to be a right? If you live in an economy which is relatively well developed and has a large economy, right? Number 6 to 8 in the world, let's say. Why aren't you educating your people for free? What's the problem, right? Why aren't some of those resources being sent into the future, right? Through education and upskilling and, helping people who find themselves born into maybe slightly less advantageous situation, giving them at least the opportunity and the pathway to better themselves? Or do you want poverty to run from generation to generation to generation, just like it does in developing countries? I mean, are we a developing country or are we a developed country? So that's a fundamental question. Now, the Workers' Party addresses that fundamental question by saying, we're going to offer education for free for life. So even if you're not ready to go to university after your A-levels or whatever, you want to go when you're 50, 60, 70, 100, go. And that seems good to me, because we all develop at different rates, right? And different paces. We all have particular life circumstances. That opportunity should never be cut off because you've passed a certain age limit or whatever, right? And it should never be cut off because you happen to be born in a council estate rather than, down the road in a mansion, right? So that's the Workers' Party policy. And that's the thinking, the fundamental thinking behind it as well. And that's the implication of it, right? It's leveling up. It's going to foster much more social mobility, an opportunity for everyone. Now, there's another issue.
Mohammed, I just want to add. I don't have much to add, but I've just been looking at the debt because it was in the newspapers today that it was reported that the 1.8 million people in this country with £50,000 worth of student debt. So a quick sort of punch into the calculator. That's £90 billion worth of debt that currently exists, which actually is more money than we could. It's actually more money than we might spend on arms in a year. Although I'm not sure about that, but it's a massive chunk of money. So I mean, it just says it all really, and goes back to the points we were making earlier. Is that people just deciding not to educate their children, or they can't anyway educate their children, and even children deciding that they don't want to go to university because I don't want you to be poor,
exactly.
Parents,
That's a good point you make. Because I've been in that situation myself. Sorry, Dr. Mohammed Ali. I've been in that situation myself. My young children right now, I really want them to go to university. But then I'm thinking, how am I going to afford it? How? I'm 51 right now. Am I going to pay their fees until I'm, 90? Or, what? How am I? It's impossible. The point that you made there, Dr. Mohammed Ali, is that, unless you're somebody like Rishi Sunak, who's got a rich wife, it's totally impossible. It's totally impossible for you to pay for student fees. Sorry, Dr. Mohammed Ali, go ahead.
Yeah, no problem. It's probably discriminatory, actually, come to think of it now that you mention it, right? Because the thing is, if you come from a religion which doesn't believe in paying interest, right, where it's prohibited, and it's debatable as to whether Christianity actually falls into that or not. I'm not a religious expert, but I know Islam definitely has.
Christianity has the same aspect because Jesus overturned the tables outside the Pharisees and the stuff they were dealing with money and stuff. So he flipped over the tables and he whipped some of them for dealing with interest. So it is according to biblical rulings, it is not acceptable interest. But sorry.
Yeah, so I mean, maybe the lawyers can have a look at this. This is interesting because the thing is, isn't this discriminatory against Christians and Muslims? And because if you don't want to pay interest but you can't afford to pay the fees up front, aren't you at a disadvantage? Isn't that discriminatory? But we'll leave that for the lawyers, right? Anyway,
it's also discriminatory that Scotland gets free university tuition fees and we don't in England, and Wales is Northern Ireland. If they can do it, why can't we?
Good point.
Okay, that's a good point. So the key issue in Coventry South is Coventry South has got two universities, Coventry University and the University of Warwick, right? I did my master's a while ago, many years ago at Warwick, and I worked at Coventry University for 6 years, so I know both of them. And one of the key issues is restructuring, which is being undertaken now as we speak at Coventry University. There's a restructure in place, and they're going to get rid of a number of researchers, staff. And this seems to happen at various universities across the UK. I'll tell you what's bad about this, right? And it may shock you, but as an insider, I'm happy to share, right? You get these people who, for some reason, become the vice chancellors, right? And they are paid, 4, 5, 6, 7, I think maybe even 7 and a bit. I think the highest vice chancellor, £100,000 a year. I'm talking about, right? That's not a bad package for an academic to then move into sort of like you're earning $500,000 on average as a vice chancellor of a university, right? Now, I've often asked myself, what is the difference between these guys who are academics who've been moved into this position versus the prof sitting down the corridor who's not in that position, who's earning far less, right? I mean, how much more value do these vice chancellors actually add, right? Because of some, are they 4 or 5 times more intelligent than the prof sitting down, the corridor? What's special about these people, right? That they're earning £600,000-700,000 a year, and they're responsible for making the key decisions for these universities. And these universities at the moment now, and it happens every few years in my experience anyway, but especially now, they find they're making huge losses, and then these universities find themselves in a situation where they're restructuring and they're getting rid of staff. They're getting rid of the staff who never made those decisions, and these people stay at the top all the time. So you made the mistakes, you didn't handle the finances properly, the losses are there ultimately under your watch, right? And you're the one then who's implementing a restructure to get rid of people, working people. Profs are working people as well, right? I mean, this is the thing about the Workers' Party. It's not just working class, it's workers. That's why it's 99% of the UK population of workers. We're employees, right? I'm a worker. You're a worker, right? Everyone more or less is a worker, right? And these guys are being laid off for decisions made at the top. Who never gets restructured? The people at the top. So my attitude is actually very different. My approach, there's something that's called the Gothenburg Manifesto for Academic Freedom. It's a movement that's been started in Europe recently, actually, by academics, with the realization that these people at the top are not doing us any favors, and we need to restructure the top, actually. And one of the proposals they have is these people who become vice chancellors, who are extremely obedient to the government, I might add, in my observation. Right, they're almost like, I mean, the way I see it, and from what I've seen, they're government supervisors, and I think that's why they get paid so much money. Because like, you do a good supervisory job over these naughty academics who might be inclined once in a while to step out of line, and we'll pay you a huge pay package. Because I mean, I don't understand what value they add over the prof down the corridor that they should be paid 4 or 5 times more. I don't get it. But anyway, I diverge. Yeah, I mean, one of the things these guys talk about in the manifesto is restructuring the top so that people at the top are temporary, so that they're rotated every once in a while on a regular basis, so they can't set down their power structures, and there is more of a democratic input from both, staff, researchers, faculty, and students as well into how universities are being run. And I think the Workers' Party has got a policy. It's at draft level at the moment. It's under consultation, and I'm going to be feeding into that very strongly in this particular direction, because I think enough's enough. We see it everywhere. They make the mistakes, and it's the workers who pay the price, and some of them even get promoted upwards for failure, right? We've seen this again and again. It's just the whole system needs a restructure. I'm sorry, it's
100%. Yeah, I'd love to get your thoughts, John and Paul. I know you've been patiently waiting. John, do you want to go first?
I could go first. So in terms of what it's just really interesting hearing that, because we all know about different things, right? So I was thinking about what happens on the top layer of health services in terms of senior managers who are controlling large budgets for trusts. So you've got Coventry and Warwickshire Partnership Trusts and so forth. And there seems to be a similar theme in terms of them staying there a certain amount of time and then getting into a little bit of trouble in various ways, usually some kind of profiteering or corruption, I might suggest, and then moving somewhere else. They call it a golden handshake, don't they? Where, would like you to move on. We used to talk about this all the time, golden handshakes to go and get a new job somewhere else and go and do the same thing again. And they're kind of almost swapping with one another, really. They're kind of swapping over. Well, you go and cause some damage here and I'll cause it over in your patch. And I think that there's a theme here, and we said this right at the beginning, that, you know, we could talk about education, we could talk about the health service, we could talk about a number of other things, but the same theme is going on. And that's, you've got this top 1% taking advantage of a structure and a system that allows them to be able to essentially get away with a lot of stuff, which usually the general theme is money coming out of public funds going into private hands. So what we're seeing here is an increasing wealth gap between the rich and poor, not just because of what's happening on the ground to the 99%, but because the 1% know how to play that game, and they know how to take the money out of public funds, and so it goes on. And I think I love what you said about we need a restructure at the top, because it's not ordinary people. There's not a problem with ordinary people. They might try and blame it on, like, remember what was his name, Tebbit, said, you know, on your bike and all the rest of it. People need to basically, you know, have more of a work ethic, and they need to work harder, and they need to put up with harder working conditions and just work harder, because we're in a financial crisis, right? So, you know, it's something that you need to help us with. That's a complete lie. That we're helping them to carry on doing the same thing. And I think we're here to remind people of that. And the sooner people wake up to it, the sooner that we can do something about it to clean the whole mess up.
I just wanted to add, sorry.
No, Paul, sorry. No, I agree what John said. I totally agree. I can't disagree with that. Go ahead, Paul.
I wanted to add, I mean, Dr. Muhammad Ali's talked about this situation in education, and John's talked about it in the NHS. I just wanted to add a little bit about what Workers' Party's policies are in this area to form a solution to this restructuring that's needed, not only in those two areas that my colleagues are specialists in, but also in the running of the utilities, the water boards, the electricity boards, the gas boards, but also private enterprise. What Workers' Party puts forward is a plan of worker ownership. So we structure that top level. We put workers onto the boards of the large monopoly companies, into the utility boards, along with education and whatever. And this is, I think, exemplified by our fan ownership of football clubs model, where we would want the big football clubs to be owned not by the Glazers or by Sisu in Coventry's case, which caused our devastation when they owned it, but to have fan owners who can decide the club's future and give the community a stake in it as well. Hopefully drive forward its potential.
Is it okay if I just quickly jump in at this point and just thank you for saying that, because you I mean, at this point in time, the local football club here in Nuneaton is in such dire straits. They need £6,000 just to be able to keep the club alive. Now, this is a community asset that you know is the town's football club, and they need £6,000 to actually just keep the club alive. This is buying things like kits and having a pitch and this kind of thing. They've started a fundraiser. So I mean, I can't send you a link or anything like that right now, but I just want to draw people's attention to it for watching. I mean, it may be an issue for Coventry City and other clubs like West Bromwich Albion, my team. But the local clubs are dying, and they you know, these are community assets. I know not everyone's a football fan, so you might want to talk about rugby clubs or other things, but I suspect they have a little bit more help than the football club. So sorry, I just wanted to big up Nuneaton and basically draw people's attention to the plight of the club.
Yeah, it's a history with Nuneaton and Coventry City. I remember when Coventry City, the Rico, they had issues there at the Rico, and of course Coventry City used Nuneaton, I'm sure they did, as a ground to play their matches, because due to the lack of management at the Rico, and that's a story in itself, isn't it? If you want to touch on that. But finally, I'm really gonna put it on you guys now, and I really want you to be passionate about this. And I'm gonna hit Brother Paul with this first one, with this first opportunity to speak up. Why vote for the Workers' Party of Britain? And I really want you to be passionate on this, guys, because here in Coventry, I've been here all my life since 1971. That was the year I was born in. I see that there is a lack of interest now in the two main parties. And if you had to pump somebody up to say, go out there, don't waste your time, don't feel that you're going to be disappointed in putting your vote forward, how would you now have the opportunity? You've got the opportunity now to call out for the people of Coventry to go out and vote. Why vote for the Workers' Party of Britain? Paul, I'm going to let you do it first, and I'm going to give you 5 minutes if you're going to need that. But go ahead.
Well, I think the people of Coventry and Warwickshire, they always have wanted a socialist solution, and we've spelled out a lot of our policies here today that we hope to achieve with the Workers' Party, and we can offer the people of Coventry this solution. But from the heart, I think you touched on earlier, is at the heart of it, it's our anti-war message, it's our peace in Gaza message, it's our peace in Ukraine message, it's our no to NATO message. That's really at the heart of it. And you being a faith-based channel, Brother Mohammed, I wanted to express something you touched on earlier, that if you're going to vote for a genocide party, if it comes to the judgment day, how are you going to explain yourself?
Wow. That is powerful, Paul. You really hit me there, mate. 100%. 100%. Thank you for that, Paul. Brother John, I'm going to put you onto the main screen. Go ahead.
Thank you. Yeah, okay. So right at the beginning, you said that we don't want to go into a third world war, that we're on the edge of a third world war. I say that we're at war already. And I say that at the moment, we need to stop what's happening in Gaza, and we need to stop what's happening in Ukraine. And we also need to stop the other things that are going on right now. I think that, we're the only party that are taking this anti-war stance. I don't think that it would have been possible for us to achieve very much until the situation in Gaza. But now the mask has dropped because everyone can see the hypocrisy of the duopoly in this country, the political class of Labour and Conservative, who are more cheeks of the same ass in more ways than one. Because I genuinely believe that the Conservatives know that they can't get in power, want to get Labour in. And when Labour can't get in power, they want to get Conservatives in, because they both want to control this. And I think that this cycle has to break. So I think what we're putting forward is a very, very clear, as Dr. Mohammed said, it's very, very actually quite simplistic in some ways. It makes perfect sense to flag this up. And I think this is a time now where I think people are waking up to what's going on and seeing the hypocrisy of this, and whether or not that we can do enough to, we're not going to form a government this time, are we? But we're here now. So we're here to make a big announcement. So there's no wasted votes for us, because the more of a splash that we make, the more able that we are to continue resisting this absolute hypocrisy and lies that we've been putting up with now for a long time.
Thank you, John. Very powerfully said. Appreciate that. Dr. Mohammed, final. If you had to call to your community or the people living in your area to come and vote for the Workers' Party, what message would you give to them?
The thing is, all the polls say that Starmer's going to be in number 10. I think, it would be a miracle if he doesn't end up there, after tomorrow. We all know the polls can be off, but they can't usually be that off, right? That's very rare. But assuming that he's going to be in, you have a choice as an electorate in Coventry and in Nuneaton as well. Starmer's going to be in number 10. You're not actually choosing who's going to be in the government in this election. Nobody in the country actually is choosing who's going to be in the government. In some elections, you get a neck and neck horse race. Is it going to be Conservatives? Is it going to be Labour? People get passionate, and that's not the case in this election. It's almost like a foregone conclusion. It has been more or less from the very beginning, right? Since it was announced. The choice you actually have to make is who's going to be the opposition. That's what you're voting for in this election. Who do you want in opposition to Starmer? So either you can go for Sunak, right? The idea of it just makes me laugh, right? Or the Conservatives, right? or you can go for someone like George Galloway, or someone like John, or someone like Paul here, or someone like myself, right? Who will give, you know, Labour a run for their money, right? Or do you want somebody who's already Labour, who Starmer's going to be their boss? It's a foregone conclusion. You're not voting for who you want in government. You're voting for who you want in opposition. If you vote for Labour this time, then you're voting for no opposition for Coventry and Nuneaton. And then you take what you get then. Live with what you voted for. And I go back actually to Paul's point. It's very profound and it's very insightful, actually, what you said. Because the thing is, in Islam, if you contribute to some bad, you've got a part of it, right? And you're going to be questioned about it. And if you contribute towards some good, you've got a part in it and you'll be rewarded for it. So the thing is, in terms of a vote, one way definitely of thinking about it, if you're a religious person, is do you want a share? What sort of share do you want? What share do you want? You could say in Urdu, you call it a hissa, What hissa do you want? And, are you going to be asked about that hissa? Now, the thing is, it makes absolutely no logical sense if you're a Muslim voting for Labour, even if you want them in, even if you want Starmer in number 10, why would you vote for Labour? Because by not voting, you're not going to get a hissa. You're not going to be responsible or questioned for what they do, but you're still actually getting what you want. So why would you vote for them? So anyway, I just thought I'd bang around some ideas. You're voting for who you want in opposition. It's a foregone conclusion who's going to be in government. So take your pick.
Yeah, there's a verse in the Quran. The chapter is called Ma'idah, and it's profound actually because it's also in the Old Testament. If you kill one innocent person, it's like killing all of mankind, and if you save one innocent person, it's like you save all of mankind. And we have to really put that into perspective in how we go ahead in this general election. The stance that the two main parties have made is that they're willing to kill innocent people. They're willing to kill all of mankind. And you have this party who's saying, no, let's save one person, and it's like saving all of mankind. And that is mind-boggling, brothers and sisters. And I'm trying not to get emotional here, that we have to stand in front of God, and we are going to be questioned for everything that we do. And this is one of the reasons I have this channel, CovFF, is because even what I put out there as content, I'm going to be questioned for. And this is why off air I said to you, brothers, that I try not to have people to use bad language and try to be polite and respectful, because I am going to be questioned for this. And people in the audience know my stance on keeping my channel real and keeping it clean. So it's very important that we have this mindset. But finally, brothers and sisters, unfortunately, we are coming to an end to the show, and it's nearly been 2 hours. Really appreciate everybody. We've had an international audience, and I'd like to say a big thank you to Paul for letting me observe him going canvassing, talking to the local residents here in Folsall and Stony Stanton, and seeing him interact with the people has been interesting. And I'd love to get these gentlemen back on, maybe possibly on the weekend, to see what the results are and how they feel the voting went. And I do feel that the contribution from the community is going to be poor, meaning that they're not going to go out and vote because they've had enough. They really have had enough of the two political parties. And I'd love to see the figures and facts on that on Saturday, if that's okay with you, gentlemen, that we can maybe unite again on Saturday and get some feedback.
Yeah,
sure, I look forward to it, and I'd just like to thank you, Mohammed, for everything you've done, giving Workers' Party a voice to show what we're about in Coventry, and give us the time tonight for us to show what the three candidates are doing here. I really appreciate it, and I hope we can chat again soon and do this again after the election, like you say.
No, the pleasure's all mine. Sister Heinz, Sister Always Hope, she's from America. She always comments on my videos that I do on YouTube. And she mentioned the other day that Allah, God Almighty, or Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala, opened the door for me to just bump into you outside that little restaurant, because I'm always making aware of the situation in where I live when it comes to fly tipping, potholes, and how the councillors have let us down, how the politicians have let us down. And then, subhanallah, after a couple of days, I bump into you. And I was so happy, excited that I bumped into you. And I feel that this is written for me. You know, as we, as Muslims and people of faith, feel that things are written for us to happen. And this was written for me. And the pleasure's all mine to meet John, to meet Dr. Muhammad Ali Said. It's been an honor to have the same platform and share the platform, you know, with you guys. And I really appreciate it. The pleasure is all mine, no doubt about that. There is a couple of quick questions before we wrap it up. Last question, which we were talking about. What's their projection for Saturday? Shall we leave that for Saturday, or shall we touch on it?
It'll be Friday morning.
It'll be over on Saturday, so we won't be able to make a prediction.
Okay.
Yes, no one knows. No one's polled the Workers' Party, but we're hoping it'll be something good. The small polls we've done ourselves predict high percentages. That's all I can say. Just vote Workers' Party, because Britain deserves better.
Yeah, you touched on that, because even when I came home after I said to you, Brother Paul, I had to come home, do the school run. So many people phoned me, contacted me, even my family members said, you know, we saw the clips that you did. You know, who are the Workers' Party of Britain? They didn't know, and alhamdulillah, you know, I said, you know, this is who the party is. I showed them the flyer. They saw a picture of George Galloway. Oh yeah, we know who George Galloway. I'm going to vote for. I didn't know they had a candidate. And you know, through the little clips that we did in the morning, my own family members, and one was supposed to vote today. They sent it off, and my older children who are eligible to vote, they are going to vote for Paul, because you know, because of what we did this morning. And I really encourage everybody. I've not voted at all in my life. I've never have. I'm one of these people who don't believe in democracy. I'm from the old school. I'm quite religious, to be honest. And I'll probably get people point fingers at me of having a political stance. I've never voted. I've never have. And so my advice to anybody who is willing to vote, the option's there, is right in front of you. So if you are going to vote, I would say vote for the Workers' Party of Britain. I'm getting some statements in the chat. I'm gonna you registered, but that's what I mean. Yeah, I have registered, but I don't vote. But I'm willing to help people and point them to the direction of to vote. So I don't abstain. I don't even cast a vote. That's what I mean. But that's a personal reason. But nevertheless, we have to wrap the show up, and it's been a fantastic show. And God willing, we can maybe meet up back on Saturday to get everybody's feedback. Final thoughts. I'm going to give everybody a minute just to end the show. So I'm going to give. John's got a phone call coming in, but Dr. Muhammad Ali Said, just a final wrap up of 1 minute, if you don't mind, before we wrap the show up.
Okay. So one of the things I do with researchers is I coach them, right? I do sort of like, you know, I coach researchers as well. So, you know, looking into this aspect of moral courage in relation to Gaza and more generally as well, I realized that we've all got the capacity to be morally courageous, but we have to force ourselves into slightly uncomfortable situations. And I deliberately set out a few months ago to do that, and Gaza was the instigator for me. And believe me, if you had ever asked me, right, if a year ago you'd asked me, you're going to be standing as a as a candidate MP in any election anyway. You know what? I mean, Paul and John know I don't have any Twitter or I'm a very sort of I'm just not out there sort of person. I just do my things what I want to do. But the thing is, you work on it, you force yourself, put yourself into slightly uncomfortable situations, and what I found is your capability actually expands. You can actually, by placing yourself, when you just do it, force yourself, right? And step by step, what you'll find is you transform. And we all have the potential to become very, very morally courageous. And we all now need to become very morally courageous, because the politicians we've got, they're not. Of course, George is the exception, which attracted me to the party in the first place, right? But the thing is, when you look at the vast majority of them, they're not morally courageous. They haven't got the ability to stand up for what's right when they're under pressure. So we're going to have to do it. Not just me and John and Paul and Mohammed and all of us who are already making some sort of effort, however minimal, it might be. But each of the viewers here, I would request, make the intention that you're going to work to become more morally courageous. And when I did it, I actually found it works. So please give it a try.
Thank you for that, Dr. Muhammad Ali Said. I really appreciate that. Fantastic. John, a minute to you too also, before we wrap the show up.
So we're all accountable for future generations. In terms of what we vote for this election or what we've done, we could have conversations 10, 20, 30 years time with our grandchildren and our children, and they might ask us, what did you do? What did you vote to stop what was happening in Gaza? What did you do about the genocide in Gaza? And I hope that people reach into their hearts with that question and think right now about whether they could vote for a man who has essentially governed it, essentially caused it, and a man who has excused it. And I hope that people can see that George Galloway and his party have been the ones who stood up for it. And that's what you want to be saying to your grandchildren in 30 years' time.
Oh, mashallah. Well said, John. I appreciate those words. They do mean a lot, actually. Paul, 1 minute to you, if you don't mind.
Sure. Well, I'd just like to say that there is more that you can do even by just helping. People can go to our website, the workerspartyofbritain.org. You can read our manifesto. You can perhaps join up. You can donate or promote help with our coming campaigns at different levels. I mean, you say you can't vote, but it's again a question, really. What's the morally courageous thing to do? The best vote. I never used to vote much, but in 2005, I voted for George Galloway in Betson Green and Bow, and we took a stance, and my vote was powerful, and it got him into power to challenge the Labour government on the Iraq War. So I hope people feel the power of their votes if they can use them.
Yeah, for those people who do vote, this is the chance. I don't think you're ever going to get a chance again in your lifetime to make a big change. And I think if you don't get out there now and want to make a change, you never will. And again, I want to echo the feelings that if you see what's taking place right now in Palestine and all over the world, and if you don't make a move now, you never will. And to be honest, if World War III happens, you're definitely gonna never will make a move again. So if you want to stop the wars, I would say go to the Workers' Party of Britain and do what you have to do. And here in Coventry, we're blessed with two particular individuals who are willing to make a change and willing to go out there and make a change and put in the hard work. And I've seen that physically today, and I'm sure as you saw my videos, you saw Paul canvassing in the local area, speaking to people from the community, and it was really nice to see that. So brothers and sisters, we do have to end the show, and hopefully Saturday, God willing, we'll do a recap and hopefully get some good news delivering to the audience that how well Dr. Muhammad Ali Said, John and Paul, we see some facts and figures, and inshallah it will be very interesting. And thank you for watching. This is your brother Muhammad from Coventry, and final words of salutation to the audience is Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah wa barakatuh, which means may the peace and blessings of God Almighty be upon all of you, and hope you have a good evening or a good day, no matter wherever you are in the world. Thanks for watching and tuning in, and don't forget to like and subscribe. And I can really go on. I've just had a cup of coffee and I'm quite hyper right now, but unfortunately we do have to end the show. For once again, thank you for Dr. Muhammad Ali and John and Paul for joining me. Really appreciate it. Stay tuned for the next one on Saturday. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah wa barakatuh.
Onward to victory, inshallah.
Inshallah.